For more on this week's historic talks, we're joined from Beijing by Hu Shisheng, the director of the Institute for South and Southeast Asia and Oceania Studies. From New Delhi, we're joined by Pramit Pal Chowdhury. He's the foreign editor of the Hindustan Times. And with me here in Washington, D.C. in the studio is Tanvi Madan. She's a fellow in the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's go around and look at the significance of this visit by President Xi to India. Tanvi Madan, let me start with you. You said this visit presents both a challenge and an opportunity.
Yes, an opportunity because new leaderships on both sides. They both said that they want to take this relationship to on a different track, to a one where there's more cooperation rather than the conflictual or the competitive elements. But that's also the challenge. You have, as much as there is an economic relationship that has been bringing the two sides closer, it is also something that has divided them in terms of a trade deficit that India is concerned about. And then you have the long-running border dispute, which, as we saw in the Indian press, as it played out this week, remains something that the two sides will have to grapple with and potentially solve.
Pramit, these are two emerging powers. Why did the summit take so long to happen?
Well, I think in the case of India, of course, we just had elections and a new government came to power. And Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, has been very focused on domestic repair of the economy. But she is the first major foreign visitor to India that he has hosted. He did, of course, go to Japan, but he flew to Japan for his first major bilateral visit. But in terms of the last government, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, it was a government that, especially in the last 5 years, was almost incapable of doing anything. And I think for the Chinese, this was particularly made such a visit almost useless, because you had a prime minister who could promise a lot but deliver on nothing. And I think this is why they see Modi as something different as far as the Indian political system is concerned.
Hu Shisheng, when we look at this visit, it seems the message here is these two countries telling each other, look, we have more in common than we have different. How does this summit in some way change the geopolitical picture in Asia right now when we see two leaders of two powerful countries, two emerging economies get together like this?
Because China and India, not only the top two populous countries in the world, but also the top two developing economies in the world. So these two giants cooperation will not only make contributions to the two peoples, that is accounting about 1/3 of the whole population, but also it will be a great contribution to the world. I often said that China and India not only have the capacities to change the world order, but also have the capacities to change the surface of this planet. So the strategic cooperations between these two countries go far beyond the bilateral categories. So have the global significance, strategic significance. And also I would like to say that the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit also have several other significance. One is that to show that China really value its relations with India. China is really committed to peaceful cooperation, sustainable relationship with India. And the second is that it is the initial stage of both new governments. So she would like to take the chance to draw a roadmap or even set tune for the bilateral relations future development in the coming years, at least in the coming 5 years or even 10 years. Last one is that she would like to building up very close personal relations with Indian leaders, because the Sino-Indian relations is often guided by top leaders. If the top leaders has very close relations, it means the Sino-Indian relations will march in the right direction.
Right, Tanvi, the focus here has clearly been economic. China talking about investing $20 billion for these infrastructure projects in India. But there is that territorial dispute that you mentioned at the outset. Realistically, are they going to make any progress on it, or is it still going to be a policy of how do we manage this rather than resolve it?
I think you have seen both reports, and from what we've heard from both the leaders, that they understand that you can focus on just management of the border issue, but what that is going to do is basically, you can't just put it in a box. It is going to affect every other part of the relationship. It will, if the border dispute continues to fester, you're going to have a situation where the many things that Hu Shisheng outlined are not going to be possible, because it will bleed into it into these other issues at various points. So I think they will try to move to that different area where you try to actually solve it. Whether that can be done quickly, that's something I'm a little more skeptical about. I think in some ways both sides know the contours of what an agreement's going to be. I suspect we will see it fairly soon some kind of naming of teams on both sides, who's going to take the lead on this. But it is going to take time in terms of not just getting the agreement done, but actually selling it to their own bureaucracies and publics. I would like to say, just on Hu Shisheng's point, about President Xi showing that China values India's role and relationship. I think one of the things that it has been another problem is that there have been doubts in India that China truly respects India. I think in some ways President Xi, especially going to Prime Minister Modi's home state to establish that personal relationship, helped. But I think there's going to be still questions. How much respect will China show? Will China really recognize India's role in the kind of global community? And finally, is there an effort to actually show that China's intentions, not just what it's saying, but is China going to follow through in terms of intentions, which there are also doubts about in India?
Okay, I want to get back to the relationship between these two leaders, because it does go back some way, at least between the leader of India and China. But I want to get to Promit and ask him a question about the territorial dispute. Promit, why has this been such an intractable problem between these two countries? Why have they not been able to resolve it? What is the history of the dispute?
Well, as you know, back in 1962, when the wars between the two countries broke out, in effect, the Chinese argued that the western chunk of Kashmir, called Aksai Chin, was an area that was never really controlled by India and definitely was not controlled by the British, and therefore was always an integral part of China. And therefore, when China began to move into there, there's an area that's almost unpopulated. India saw this as an act of aggression. Then there were disputes on other parts on the eastern side. But in effect, right now, what we have is a Chinese holding of Aksai Chin. And to be fair, I think a lot of Indian strategists will say realistically this is something that India will never get back and never really held in the first place. But in return, China's argument is you accept our control of Aksai Chin, and we will surrender our claims on another part, the Arunachal Pradesh, as India calls it, South Tibet called by China, which is also effectively held by India. So the border negotiations have really been about trying to convert what both sides already hold, the so-called line of actual control, recognizing what that is, and then saying that, look, we have these areas which are directly held by both sides, and all we then have to do is worry about the no man's land in between. It's been a politically difficult decision for the Indian side to move forward, but I think what the surprise was that and in 2006, they actually did go very far. I mean, I thought they came out with the basic principles for coming to an understanding about that the areas that are held by both sides should be what is important. But then roughly from about 2008 to 2010, the Indians argue, then went back on some of those principles, and then it became another stalemate. But keep in mind that while there is a border dispute, there is not much of a border conflict. No soldier has died on either side since 1986. And I've been to the border and I've talked to soldiers on the Indian side, and they sort of treat it almost like a game. They said, yeah, we play around with each other, but they have very clear orders on both sides. Don't be hostile, don't push anything. The game is, can we, as you've mentioned, manage the border situation sufficiently that it does not color what is basically a non-existent economic relationship. And that has been the big accomplishment of this trip, is that, yes, $20 billion over 5 years is not too much, and it's not anything compared to the $100 billion that was being talked about at one point before the trip. But what it does, $20 billion is still massively more than what exists today. China, the world's second largest economy, has only $400 million of foreign direct investment in India, largely because India is very, very reluctant to allow Chinese to invest there. And that's where you're going to start to see an expansion, still not massive by Chinese standards, but massively much greater than what exists today.
Tanvi, I'll get to you in a moment. I just want to go to Hu Shisheng. Hu Shisheng, President Xi is obviously attaching a lot of importance to this visit. He said he wants a situation where China and India speak with one voice on the world stage. We've heard about the Chinese investment in India. We've heard about China and India both wanting to improve relations. But what is in this for Beijing?
I think it is because India is the second biggest neighbor of China. China would like to see building up harmonious surroundings because China would like to steer forward on domestic development. So we would like to see a favorable environment. This is the first point. Second is that since last year, this new government of China has put forward the grandeur strategic ideas like the land-based Silk Road and maritime Silk Road. While the land-based Silk Road and maritime Silk Road want to interface where? That is in the subcontinent. So we need the Indian strategic cooperation. That is to say, to make interface between India's look-east policy or strategy with China's eastward strategy. So that make India and China to be interdependent, to be connected, so that both India and China can make more contributions to the regional stability, to the regional development. And also, China would like to see that through this kind of development, China would encourage Chinese businessmen to invest abroad because we have surplus production capacities. We also have a huge amount of reserves of capitals. We would like to invest abroad. Last year, for example, China has not only become one of the biggest recipients of FDI from abroad, but also become one of the biggest provider or supplier of ODI, that is overseas development investment. So China would like to encourage our businessmen to go abroad. Then first, go to our neighborhood, so that to form a certain kind of developmental partnership. I think this could be means a significance to Chinese. And also, last one is that we also want to, through this kind of construction of good relations with India, to warning the others, don't play cards against each other between India and China.
Right. Okay, we are going to have to take a break.